Hi guys, this is Ms. Thomas speaking, and this is the Unit 5 Asynchronous Recording for Business Math B. Today we are going to take it Lesson 22, Calculating Manufacturing Costs, and Lesson 23, Interpreting Cost and Revenue Graphs. Let's get started with Lesson 22. So a few vocabulary words to get us started. First, direct labor costs. This is the cost of labor used to manufacture a product. So specifically, this would refer to the cost that you're paying your employees. So employee wages and things related to having people on hand. Direct material costs are the cost of materials used to manufacture a product. So direct labor cost is the cost of your people, and direct material cost, whatever it is that you need. So for example, if you sold furniture, this could be cost of upholstering materials, lumber, nails, whatever, okay? Now prime cost is the cost of these two things together. So prime cost, you have to pay people and you need materials to make items. So when these people make these items for you and we combine those costs, that's our prime cost. So again, we have direct labor cost, cost to hire people and related expenses, direct material cost, just the cost of the items that go into the particular finished product itself, and then prime cost, what we get when we add those two costs together. So let's take a look at an example that's going to ask us to figure out prime cost of manufacturing. Let's say we have a manufacturer of scarves who pays an average of $4 for the wool to make a scarf. The direct labor charge for the scarf weaver is $8.25, and each weaver can produce 8 scarves an hour. So to the nearest cent, what is the prime cost of manufacturing a scarf? Okay. So we've been given information about wages and we've been given information about materials. And again, we're being asked, what is the prime cost of manufacturing a scarf? Remember, prime cost, as we learned in our last slide, is just when we take material cost per item plus direct labor cost per item. Now they have told us outright that the direct material cost per item is $4. They said they pay an average of $4 for the wool to make each scarf. And keep in mind that when we're looking at this, it is per item. So again, if it's $4 for the wool to make one scarf, then the direct material cost is $4 for that one scarf. But we also need to know direct labor cost per item, and it says the direct labor charges for the weavers is $8.25 an hour, and each weaver can produce 8 scarves an hour. So we need to break this down into what wage we're paying out per scarf. Okay, so if a weaver is paid $8.25 an hour and in that hour produces 8 scarves, what is each scarf costing us in wages? Well, we'll take the hourly pay rate, $8.25, and divide by the number of units per hour. So $8.25 divided by 8 is $1.03. So we are on average paying this employee about $1.03 for each scarf that he or she is creating. So that's the direct labor cost per item. And that's the biggest thing you need to pay attention to with these problems. Make sure that you break down costs per unit or per item. Okay, so now that we have the direct labor cost per item, we can go back to our prime cost equation. We already knew that it costs $4 per material to make a scarf. We just found out that in addition to that, we're paying out about $1.03 in direct labor costs per item. So the grand total is $5.03 is the prime cost per item. Let's look at another example. To make a profit, Alma knows that her prime cost of producing wooden desks cannot exceed $50. The lumber and materials needed to make 2 desks cost $45. So what can she afford to spend on direct labor costs? Okay. So this time, notice that we're not looking at prime costs. We're trying to figure out direct labor costs. How much can she afford to pay people? Well, we're still going to take a look at our prime cost equation because notice that they did mention all of the elements of this equation. So they mentioned direct labor costs, right? Prime cost was mentioned, And finally, lumber and materials needed, so they mentioned the material cost. So they've mentioned these three elements of this equation. This time they told us prime cost. They said that she cannot afford to cannot exceed $50. So our prime cost per item then is going to be $50 at most. Now, the thing we're trying to figure out, again, is her direct labor cost. This is what we're trying to solve for. Direct material costs. They mentioned that the lumber and materials needed to make 2 desks cost $45. So we ask ourselves, if 2 desks materials cost $45, what does one set of materials for a desk cost? Well, if it's 2 for $45, we take $45 and divide by 2, and we find that the direct cost per item is $22.50. So we can plug that into our equation now, and we find that $50, which was our prime cost, is equal to $22.50, and that's what we just calculated as the direct material cost, plus direct labor cost. So simplifying, direct labor cost can be as much as $27.50, and that's per item. Okay, so she can afford to pay someone up to $27.50 per item manufactured. Again, I think the most difficult aspect of these is just making sure that you're changing things into cost per item. So it might be really easy to kind of skim this question, and you might accidentally use $45 as your cost per item, which would be incorrect. So just keep an eye out for that. Make sure you're either, if more than one item per hour is produced, make sure you're equating that into labor cost per item, and same with materials. Make sure you convert to material cost per item before plugging in to the equation. Now there's one other type of problem that comes up pretty frequently in this lesson, and in fact I took this example from your workbook for that reason. There are quite a few examples that look like this, and let's read it. It says, Juarez Distribution Company conducted a time study of Martha Smith's job as an installer. So using the observation chart, find her average time for the first 2 tasks combined. Okay, so at first it looks a little tricky simply because there's a lot of information on this chart. But notice that what they're asking us is something that you have practiced doing throughout this class and previous math classes, which is just finding an average. So they want us to find her average time for the first 2 tasks combined. So we just need to find averages. We need to practice finding averages. Now, look at the chart. It gives us a list of tasks and then time it takes to complete each task. So if I'm looking at the first task, picking up a tool, what you're seeing, the number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, it means they watched her do it 5 times. And the first time it took her 3.4 seconds, the second time it took her 3.5 seconds, etc. Okay? So we need to find the average time for the first 2 tasks combined. Before we do that, though, we'll need to find the average time for each individual one. Okay, so our game plan is going to be to find the average time it took her to pick up the tool, which is task 1. Then we'll find the average time it took her to insert the tool into the machine, which is task number 2. Okay, then we'll add those times together, and that'll give us the average time that it took both tasks together. Now, this isn't the only way you could set this up. I think this is just a little bit easier to visualize, and that's why I'm choosing to do it this way. So how do we find averages? Remember, when we're finding an average, you take the sum of whatever it is and you divide by the number of whatever it is. Okay? So the sum is the thing that usually has a unit attached to it. Whether it is, in this case, we're talking about the sum of all the total seconds. Often in this class, we've done stuff where you had to add up money and then divide by the number of whatever you had. If we were averaging test scores, you would add up the total number of points and then divide by the total number of tests, right? So point being, the denominator always ends up being your sum of whatever thing that is attached to a unit, and then you divide by just the number of items. Okay, so in this case, that means we're going to sum up all of the pickup tool seconds, right? So we're going to take 3.4 plus 3.5, plus 4.3, plus 2.9, plus 3.6. We're adding all that up. And then we're going to divide by the number of times she was observed. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 numbers there, 5 observations. So we'll divide by 5. Okay, and that gives us 3.24. So that's her average time for that first task. Now let's get an average time for the second task. So her second task was inserting the tool into the machine. And just like before, we're going to find the average of those 5 times, and we'll do it the same exact way. So we're going to add up all of our seconds, right? So we just it took her 4.1 seconds the first time, 4.3 the second time, etc. We add all of that up, and then we divide by 5 because there are 5 numbers represented there. And then we get 4.26 as her average for that task. So we have 3.54 average for the first task, 4.26 for the second. So to find the average for the first 2 tasks combined, we're going to just add the 2 averages together. Okay, so on average, we're saying it takes her about 7.8 seconds to do both of these tasks. Okay, and that's it for this concept, practicing looking at manufacture and laboring costs. Go ahead and proceed to the corresponding asynchronous activities after this video. I'll see you guys next time.